So picture this. You're on a first date at a nice restaurant in Busan. The conversation is flowing, you're actually enjoying yourself. And then you remember that if this goes well, the government will literally send you money. Not for having kids, not for getting married, just for agreeing to keep seeing each other. Welcome to South Korea in 2024, where the dating scene has turned into the world's most expensive reality show. Except the producers are government officials in suits, and the grand prize is saving an entire nation from demographic collapse. If you want to see how throwing money at love actually plays out, hit that subscribe button right now, because what comes next is wilder than any K-drama you've binged. Let's talk about what's actually happening here, because the headline number floating around needs some serious context. Various districts in South Korea are offering different amounts, but here's what Busan Saha District is putting on the table. 500,000 won each, about $360, just for agreeing to date after meeting at a government matchmaking event. Another million won each, roughly $720, if your families meet to discuss marriage. Then 20 million won, around $14,700, as a wedding gift. Add in 30 million won for a housing deposit or 800,000 won monthly rent for 5 years, and you're looking at somewhere between 53 to 71 million won total, which converts to roughly $38,000 to $52,000 depending on exchange rates and which benefits you qualify for. Other areas have different programs. Seoul is offering a million won starter fund for newly married couples and giving out dating expense coupons worth up to 10 million won to couples who match at their Riverside matchmaking events. Some rural counties are going even harder, offering 10 million won distributed over several years just to stay in the area after getting married. But here's the thing that makes this story absolutely fascinating. It might actually be working. Sort of. Maybe. The data is complicated. In February 2025, South Korea announced something that hadn't happened in 9 years. The birth rate went up. The fertility rate climbed from 0.72 in 2023 to 0.75 in 2024. Now, before you start thinking that's some massive victory, let's put this in perspective. A fertility rate of 2.1 is considered the replacement level needed to maintain a stable population. South Korea is at 0.75. That means for every 100 women, only 75 babies are expected to be born over their entire lifetimes. It's still the lowest birth rate in the entire world by a significant margin. It's like celebrating because you went from absolutely catastrophic to merely disastrous. But here's where it gets interesting. Marriages jumped 14.9% in 2024 compared to the previous year. That's the biggest spike since records began in 1970. Over 222,000 couples got married, the highest number since 1996. And here's the kicker. There's typically a 1 to 2 year lag between marriages and births in South Korea because marriage is largely seen as a prerequisite for having children. So theoretically, those 2024 marriages should translate to more babies in 2025 and 2026. Now, the government is obviously trying to take credit for this, pointing to their incentive programs. But let's be honest about what's really going on. There are 3 major factors at play here, and the cash bonuses might be the least important one. First, there's the pandemic rebound effect. During COVID-19, people postponed weddings left and right. Lockdowns, restrictions, uncertainty about the future. Not exactly the ideal time to plan a big celebration or start a family. Many couples who were already planning to get married simply delayed everything by a year or 2. So some of what we're seeing is just a backlog clearing out, like when everyone rushes to the DMV the day after it reopens from a long closure. Second, and this is crucial, the population structure shifted in a favorable direction. The number of people in their early 30s increased significantly in 2024. These are prime childbearing years, so having more people in this age bracket naturally means more potential parents. It's basic math. You can't have more babies without more people of baby-making age, no matter how much money you throw at the problem. Third, and this is where things get genuinely interesting, there seems to be a legitimate shift in social attitudes. Park Hyun-jong, an official from Statistics Korea, noted that there's been a change in how people think about childbirth. with more positive attitudes emerging. After years of increasingly negative sentiment around marriage and parenthood, something appears to be shifting in the cultural conversation. But let's dig into whether these cash programs are actually changing behavior or just subsidizing decisions people were going to make anyway. Because that's a crucial distinction that gets lost in all the breathless headlines about governments paying people to date. The early results are mixed at best. Take Jinju City in South Gyeongsang Province. They've been handing out 500,000 one-marriage grants since 2021. Over 4,000 couples have received these payments, and the overall marriage rate has barely budged. Or look at Jiangsu County, which has had a 10 million one-marriage incentive program running for 8 years. Their marriage rates have continued declining except for temporary bumps in 2023 and 2024. The same years when the rest of the country also saw increases due to the factors we just discussed. One local government official put it perfectly. Would anyone really get married just to receive a congratulatory payment? It's the question that cuts to the heart of whether any of this makes sense. Marriage and having children are massive life decisions influenced by economics, career prospects, housing costs, gender equality, work-life balance, and deeply personal values. The idea that a cash bonus, even a relatively substantial one, would be the deciding factor seems almost insulting to the complexity of the issue. Think about it from a practical standpoint. In Seoul, the average apartment costs are astronomical. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for a decent place. The 30 million won housing subsidy in Busan, while not nothing, covers maybe 10 to 15% of what you'd need for a real down payment on a family home in a desirable area. It's like someone offering you $1,000 to buy a car when cars cost $30,000. Sure, it helps, but it's not solving the fundamental problem. And then there's the issue of what actually keeps people from having kids in South Korea. The average maternal age at childbirth in 2024 was 33.7 years, one of the highest in the world. Why are people waiting so long? Because the economic and social barriers are massive. Getting a stable, well-paying job in South Korea's hyper-competitive market is brutally difficult. Property prices in desirable areas have gone absolutely bonkers. The cost of raising a child, especially the educational expenses that Korean culture demands, is staggering. And perhaps most importantly, working mothers still shoulder the vast majority of household and childcare responsibilities while trying to maintain their careers. There's a survey from the Korea Population Health and Welfare Association that found 26.6% of single women and 18% of single men have no intention of getting married at all. That's not a financial calculation. That's a fundamental rejection of the traditional life path. No amount of dating coupons is going to change someone's mind if they've decided marriage isn't for them. But here's where the story takes a genuinely weird turn. The matchmaking events themselves are wildly popular. When Seoul held its first matchmaking event called Seolum in Hangang in November 2023, they weren't sure anyone would show up. Instead, 3,286 people applied for 100 spots. That's a competition rate of over 30 to 1. The Valentine's Day 2024 event, another 2,387 applicants for limited spots. When Jeonnam-do Province held a temple stay matchmaking program in August 2024, they got 1,510 applications for 20 spots, a 70 to 1 competition rate. And out of those 10 couples, 6 actually became romantic partners. So clearly there's a demand for government-sponsored dating opportunities, even without the financial incentives. Which raises the question, are people showing up for the money or for the structured opportunity to meet potential partners in a culture where traditional dating has become increasingly difficult? South Korea's work culture is notoriously brutal. The average work week is long, with limited time for social activities. Meeting new people outside your immediate work circle is challenging. The rise of digital dating hasn't solved this problem the way it has in some other countries, because Korean dating apps have their own issues with verification, safety concerns, and the same economic pressures that affect offline dating. So when the government says we'll organize a nice event at a scenic location, screen participants to ensure they're actually single and serious, and create a structured environment for meeting people that's addressing a real need that exists regardless of any cash incentives. The Temple Stay program is particularly fascinating. Participants spend 1 night and 2 days in a temple, engaging in various programs designed to help people get to know each other in a meaningful way. It's basically a meditation retreat meets dating show, and apparently it works well enough that it received a presidential award for its contribution to addressing the low birth rate. There's something almost poetic about the government trying to solve a modern crisis of individualism and economic anxiety by sending people to ancient temples to find love. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Are these programs just band-aids on a bullet wound? Most experts seem to think so. Hong Suk-chul, an economics professor at Seoul National University, argues that policies should focus on creating an environment where work and family can coexist and where housing burdens are eased. The current cash-based incentives, he suggests, are distorting the policy landscape rather than fixing the underlying problems. And he's got a point. South Korea spent astronomical amounts on various childbirth subsidies over the past decade. Baby bonuses, childcare vouchers, subsidized fertility treatments, free taxi services for families with children, exemptions from hospital bills. The birth rate continued falling through all of it. The problem was never that people couldn't afford to have one child. The problem was that the entire structure of Korean society made having children seem incompatible with any other life goals, especially for women. Here's a sobering statistic. At the current rate, South Korea's population is projected to drop from 51 million to 26.8 million by 2100. By 2072, it's expected to shrink to 36.22 million. This isn't just about having fewer babies. This is about a complete transformation of society. There were 120,000 more deaths than births in 2024, marking the 5th consecutive year of natural population decline. The country is literally shrinking in real time. The economic implications are staggering. A shrinking population means a smaller workforce, which impacts economic productivity. It means fewer young workers supporting an increasingly large elderly population through pension systems and healthcare. It means declining consumer spending and economic growth. It means abandoned towns and cities, shuttered schools, and a fundamentally different country within a single lifetime. Some regions are already feeling this acutely. Seoul's fertility rate of 0.58 is even lower than the national average. Only one major population center, the administrative city of Sejong, actually grew in population in 2024. Rural areas are facing potential extinction, which is why some of the most generous marriage incentives come from counties and provinces outside the major cities. They're not just trying to boost the national birth rate. They're trying to prevent their communities from disappearing entirely. The government has responded with increasingly desperate measures. In 2024, then-President Yoon Suk-yeol declared a national demographic crisis and proposed creating an entirely new ministry devoted to tackling low birth rates. The government plans to spend 19.7 trillion won, about $13.76 billion, in 2025 on addressing the birth rate, up 22% from 2024. That's a lot of money being thrown at the problem. But money alone clearly isn't the answer. Japan has had similar programs for years with similar results. Modest temporary improvements followed by continued long-term decline. Singapore has tried everything from government-sponsored speed dating to patriotic campaigns, encouraging couples to have more children. The birth rate there sits at 1.04, better than South Korea, but still well below replacement level. Even with generous parental leave policies, subsidized childcare, and cash bonuses, people are choosing to have fewer children. The fundamental issue is that modernization and economic development consistently correlate with declining birth rates across cultures. As countries get wealthier and more urbanized, as women gain education and career opportunities, and as the economic and opportunity costs of raising children increase, people have fewer kids. This isn't unique to Asia. Birth rates are below replacement level across most of Europe too. The difference is that South Korea has experienced compressed modernization. going from a developing nation to one of the world's most advanced economies in just a few decades. The birth rate crashed correspondingly fast. There's also a gender dynamics component that can't be ignored. South Korean women are increasingly educated and career-focused. Many see marriage and motherhood as career death sentences in a work culture that doesn't accommodate work-life balance well. The division of household labor remains deeply unequal, with women expected to manage careers while also handling the vast majority of childcare and domestic responsibilities. For many women, the calculation is simple. Staying single and childless offers more freedom, financial independence, and career success than the alternative. The matchmaking programs, for all their novelty, don't address any of this. Neither do the cash bonuses. You know what might actually help? Structural reforms to work culture that make it possible to have a career and a family. Affordable housing in areas with good schools. Mandatory parental leave that both parents actually take. Childcare that doesn't cost a fortune. Gender equality in household responsibilities. But those changes are hard, expensive, and politically complicated. It's much easier to throw money at the problem and hope it goes away. Still, there's something undeniably human about these matchmaking programs that makes them interesting beyond the policy debate. In a world where dating has become increasingly atomized and digital, where people swipe through potential partners like they're ordering food, there's something oddly wholesome about the government organizing picnics and temple stays where people can meet face-to-face without the pressure of perfect profile pictures and witty bios. And maybe, just maybe, that's what's actually working about these programs. Not the money, but the infrastructure for connection. The recognition that building a family-friendly society requires more than just financial incentives. It requires creating opportunities for people to actually meet and form relationships in an increasingly isolating world. The 2024 increase in births is modest, yes. It might be temporary, yes. It might not even be primarily caused by these programs, yes. But it's the first increase in 9 years, and that's something. Even if the birth rate is still catastrophically low, the trajectory has changed direction, even if just for a moment. The marriage boom is real, even if the reasons behind it are debatable. What happens next will tell us a lot about whether cash incentives and government matchmaking can actually make a difference or whether South Korea is just delaying the inevitable. If births continue to rise in 2025 and 2026 as those 2024 marriages translate into babies, it would suggest that something about the current approach is working. If they plateau or resume declining, it will confirm what many experts already suspect, that these programs are expensive political theater that don't address the root causes of the demographic crisis. But here's the thing about demographic trends. They're incredibly slow-moving and difficult to reverse once established. Changing a society's birth rate isn't like adjusting interest rates where you can see immediate effects. It's about shifting deeply ingrained cultural attitudes, economic structures, and individual life choices. It takes decades, not years. The real test won't be whether South Korea can nudge the birth rate from 0.75 to 0.80. It'll be whether they can create a society where having children doesn't feel like economic suicide, where marriage doesn't mean sacrificing your career, and where raising a family is compatible with modern life aspirations. That's a much harder problem to solve than organizing matchmaking events or handing out cash bonuses, no matter how generous. In the meantime, we have this bizarre spectacle of a technologically advanced, economically sophisticated nation essentially begging its citizens to fall in love and make babies. Government officials playing Cupid with taxpayer money. Temple stays as dating interventions. Cash rewards for family introductions. It would be funny if the stakes weren't so high. And maybe that's the most important lesson here. You can't solve social problems with purely economic solutions. The birth rate crisis isn't happening because people forgot that babies exist or because they couldn't do the math on whether they could afford children. It's happening because the entire structure of modern life, especially in a hyper-competitive society like South Korea, makes parenthood seem incompatible with other life goals that people value. The government can pay you to go on dates. They can subsidize your wedding. They can help with your rent. But they can't make the choice to have children less complicated, less expensive, or less likely to derail your career. They can't manufacture the economic security and work-life balance that makes people feel like they can responsibly bring children into the world. What South Korea is discovering, what many other countries are also learning, is that demographic decline isn't a problem you can buy your way out of. It's a symptom of deeper transformations in how people want to live their lives. And while throwing money at the problem makes for great headlines and shows political leaders doing something, the real solutions require fundamental changes to how society is organized. Changes that are much harder, much more expensive, and much less politically expedient than handing out dating vouchers. So yes, South Korea's birth rate increased for the first time in 9 years. And yes, the government is paying tens of thousands of dollars to couples who date and marry. And yes, the matchmaking programs are wildly popular. But whether any of this actually solves the demographic crisis, or whether it's just an expensive delay tactic, remains to be seen. One thing is certain, though. We're watching a grand experiment in real time. An entire nation is essentially asking whether you can fix a demographic crisis by making it financially attractive to fall in love. The answer will have implications far beyond South Korea's borders, as countries around the world grapple with similar trends. Japan is watching. China is watching. Singapore is watching. Europe is watching. Because if South Korea figures out a solution, everyone will want to copy it. And if they fail, well, at least they tried something creative. If you found this deep dive into South Korea's demographic crisis fascinating and want more stories about how governments worldwide are dealing with wild challenges, make sure you're subscribed to Trust Me Fam. We break down the complex situations that shape our world, add context the headlines miss, and keep it real without the boring policy jargon. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep exploring the weird, fascinating, and sometimes desperate ways humanity tries to solve its biggest problems. The story of South Korea paying people to date is ultimately a story about what happens when economic development outpaces social adaptation, when traditional structures break down faster than new ones can form, and when a society has to confront the reality that you can't have it all, at least not without fundamentally rethinking how everything works. And sometimes, when you're desperate enough, you hire the government to be your matchmaker and hope for the best.